Hello, so I'm doing a video today about how to design a logo. It's not exactly about how to design a logo. I've got lots of opinions on that, by the way, and I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to take my glasses off for a second so you can see my eyes. I'm not quite sure that you can actually teach somebody from scratch in a YouTube video how to actually design a logo. So I thought about this deeply because I wanted to put together a design tutorial that you'd actually find useful, that you could go and apply, you could go and play with and learn something from. So instead of coming up with a tutorial on how to design a logo, teaching you all the fundamentals and the other things there, I thought I'd show you 6 ways, 6 tactics that you can use to design a logo. It's the best way around I could think of it to teach you the beginnings of logo design and to discuss them in a little bit more detail. I'm using Figma for this. I don't think Figma is the best tool for this. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I do think Illustrator, unfortunately, for me, is still the best tool for designing logos and things like that. It's got some more advanced features in there than Figma has, but I will say for Figma, its pen tool is really good and it's got some features that Illustrator doesn't have. So it's kind of pros and cons. So let's jump over to Figma and let me show you 6 tactics on how to design a logo. So I've set up this artboard, and what we're going to do in this challenge is I'm going to make a logo for me, for my name, Craig Burgess. You're probably facing a similar kind of challenge, and that's what this video is really for. It's for you if you're trying to make a logo for yourself. You're probably facing this similar challenge right now. You're looking at your name, whatever it might be, on a white piece of paper like this, and you're trying to figure out what to make a logo of, how to actually turn it into a logo. Well, there's lots of ways you can turn it into a logo, and if you've never really done logo design before, you've never experimented with it, I'm guessing you haven't if you're watching this video, it's an art form more than following the rules. Logos can be very, very simple. They can be a simple symbol. They could just be a square on a piece of paper, right through to elegant and fantastic and intricate logos. Think of Coca-Cola, for example, that's been around for over 100 years. There's lots of different ways to approach logo design, and it isn't easy to just think about that. You can't look at all those different tactics and think, right, I'm going to try making a Coca-Cola logo. But these tactics in here that I've got here will help you think about it. So I've split the tactics down to the following 6 tactics. We're going to go through constraints, first of all, which is an extra tactic, which is not part of the 6. We're going to go through literal, abstract, abstract plus literal, word mark plus symbol, and symbol. I think they cover off most of the ways that you could design a logo, especially if you're brand new to logo design. So we're going to begin by looking at constraints. To actually make a logo, you can't just sit there with a blank piece of paper. This tactic of constraints, which is this sheet here, this tactic of constraints is something that designers who've been doing it for a long time naturally kind of move in and out of when they're designing anything. They'll think, right, I'm going to try and design a logo that's only shapes. What does that look like? And then they'll draw a bunch of shapes inside a sketchbook, see what it looks like and see what it comes out like. And then they'll move on to another constraint. They might say, okay, well, what does it look like if I only use circles for this idea? And then what does it look like if I only use red and black? And what does it look like if I only use black? And what does it look like if I only use this font? That is what creativity is, technically, underneath the surface. It's setting a constraint around an idea and seeing what comes out of it. Creativity isn't produced by having a blank sheet of paper like this that's just 100% white. You don't know where to start with it. That's not how things work. You need to set some constraints before you move on to any ideas. And purely so I could make this video and actually make something that doesn't turn out to be like 50 minutes long, I've set myself some constraints. These are my constraints. I'm only going to use shapes, so squares and circles and things like that, although the majority of logos are made up of those anyway. I'm only going to use the colour black, which is another thing I always do when I'm first starting logo design. I never use colours. And the third thing is I'm only going to use Druck because it is my favourite font in the entire world, and I think I could make some cool logos with it. So we're going to look at the first idea, the literal idea. when anybody's trying to make a logo for the first time, this is what everybody always does. I want to make a logo for the name Craig Burgess, which is my name. I'll type the letter C, the letter B, and see what we come up with. So the first thing that people always do with this is they'll type C and B, and then they'll pick a font. I'm using Druck for this, remember, so I'm going to pick Druck, and that's it. They've done the logo, and they've made a very literal version of their logo. Obviously, there's lots of other ways you could approach this too. If I was approaching this in a very literal fashion, this is almost a word mark fashion, because a word mark is just the word. But if I was approaching it like this, I'd start with the letters like this. I'd probably start try some different kinds of fonts. So one of my favorite fonts that I haven't got activated at the minute, because I've just deactivated them all, is a font called Bastard, which is a ridiculous black letter font, which I really like. And I'd probably try that with this. In fact, I've got to open and close Figma to activate fonts. Really annoying. Figma, please fix this. It's a really annoying feature of Figma. There we go. We're back. It's loaded. So I'm going to change this to be Bastard. And I know I said I can only use Druck. I know I can hear you saying it in the background. But this is just to show you an example of how we could do a literal symbol. So I have made a literal symbol there with another font, which is a kind of a crazy font. I'd probably just use the C. The C looks quite cool like that. That's another kind of way I could look at it. A third way I could look at it, so I could maybe use a shape, maybe a square for something like that. I could make a square and then another square inside it like this that makes a letter C. Again, I'm approaching this very literally because that's the point of this step here. I often find when I'm designing logos, I've got to get the very literal step out of my brain. I've got to come up with all these ideas, try all these ideas before I get to anything good. It can take me days sometimes to get to anything even remotely acceptable, let alone good. So this first stage of the literal stage is kind of me working through ideas, trying stuff out, and what I'd maybe do is maybe shrink those in like that. See what those kind of things look like. See if it makes any kind of interesting literal shape. It doesn't really make an interesting shape there. Then I'd probably try maybe a square again. Maybe a square that has no solid bits inside. Use a stroke on this like this. Maybe a 15 pixel stroke, and then put a B. So put another one underneath that looks a bit like a B. Not much like a B, but a little bit like a B. And then maybe I'd do something like that. You can kind of see the process that I'm starting to try here. I'm looking at things very literally. I'm trying to replicate the letter B or the letter C or both letters at the same time into some kind of symbol. So I'm just trying different tactics here. And this is the idea. This is the first stage. The literal stage is the stage that most people, when they've never really worked in kind of logo design before, this is the stage that they stop at, this is the stage that they start at, and this is the stage that they stop at, because they don't know anything further than this, and that's kind of the whole point of this video, to show you that there's other ways you could approach this. So we might do something like that, utilize a shape as well as the text, utilize some kind of nice whiteout there. So we're starting to come up with some different, not particularly original ideas, but different ideas, and then I'd mess with some of the design fundamentals. I'd mess with the positioning and the contrast and the spacing and the alignment to try and make something a little bit more interesting. And you can see there I'm nearly making the Creative Review logo, that kind of idea with the white out there. So I've made kind of 6 versions there, kind of 6 literal versions of how I could approach Craig Burgess, the letter C or B, and this applies to any kind of company. Take the first letter of each of the words inside the company name and just try them out and see what literally you can come up with. So I'd probably start somewhere like that if I was trying to come up with a symbol, and see if there was anything I was working on that got interesting. At this minute, I'm thinking that maybe this is a bit interesting. It's kind of cool, the shapes that are developing, and I like the kind of difference between the shapes, that they're not just stacked on top of each other. So there could be something interesting with that. Let's move on now to abstract. Abstract is when we look at representing the brand, in this case me, in this case the words Craig Burgess. We look at representing the brand in a very abstract way. And because I said I was only going to use shapes, I'm going to just take the circle to begin with, and I am just going to double click on it in Figma and start messing around with these handles. So I'm just going to see if any of these, messing with these handles kind of makes any cool shapes. The point here is literally just for me to mess. I'm just playing, I'm just creatively playing. I'm not looking to make anything good. In fact, it won't look good. The same thing as I said last time, it won't look good. It might become interesting at some point when I'm messing around with the shapes. I'll probably accidentally make either a swastika or a penis at some point in this, and I've kind of already done it there, because that's just the elements of logo design. It's the things that you do. But I'm just messing with the shape, seeing if there's anything cool I could make with it, and that's obviously really rubbish. But I think there was maybe something with using a circle and messing around with the handles. So I'd start a new shape like this again and start messing around with the handles. I've got this kind of image in my head, and this stage here, by the way, all the stages I'm messing with here are vastly hampered by me using a computer first instead of going to a sketchbook. It's making this much harder. This idea that I've got in my head is drawing the letter C, but it kind of blobbing down the page into kind of like a liquid thing. It's proving really difficult for me to do it here, just messing in Figma with the handles and things. But that's the kind of idea that I'm trying to go for, but it's really not visualizing properly. It's not working properly. So I just, in the abstract stage here, I'm potentially looking to visualize a C again, but I'm not. I'm actually just messing with the shapes. I'm messing with potentially different shapes like this, and I'm just knocking them together and seeing if anything interesting comes out of them. So this is kind of another, I'd call this another practice stage, where this is the stage I'd usually do in a sketchbook. I'm just playing with the abstract idea. Nothing really major would probably come out of this section, because I'm just messing with shapes and they won't mean much to anybody. In terms of an abstract shape, they're abstract, so they won't mean anything to anybody. So when I'm messing about here, nothing is likely to come together that I'm going to like or turn into a logo. We're looking for kind of accidental discoveries here when we're messing with these. We're trying to mess with shapes, and we're trying to mess with angles and all kinds of other stuff, and just seeing what comes out of it. This is the stage that's really difficult to do on a computer, so I'm going to move on to the next one because it's proving too difficult. Now we're looking at abstract plus literal. This stage here is one of the stages where I find a lot of my logo and my brand discoveries come from, because I combine an abstract shape with a literal representation of a letter or a literal representation of something inside the business. So if we're maybe working, for example, if I was working for a transportation company or something like that, what I might end up doing is making some kind of stroke like this, maybe a really thick stroke like that, and it kind of looks like a wheel. So that's where an abstract and a literal representation might come in. That's a super simplified example there, but you can kind of get what I'm meaning. And then I might take that abstract shape there and turn it into something more. I might put two next to them, and then I might make the actual things dashed instead or something like that. And then, because I've done that, we've created a really interesting abstract shape. But my company might be an optician's, for example, an optician's that only sell cool looking glasses, a kind of fashion boutique for opticians. So with the shapes that I've done there, I've made quite an interesting thing that could work as a logo for a fashionable optician's. And that's again, that's just me playing with ideas and kind of retrofitting the idea to something that looks pretty cool. But we could, as you can see there, I am making an abstract shape and then applying an idea to it after I've made the shape. And I often find discoveries are made quite easily like this. But we're talking about C and B here. We're talking about Craig Burgess. So we need to come up with something different. And this is where I think this abstract shape here had potential. So I think this shape could turn into an interesting logo. And what I'm thinking is with this. So I'm thinking there might be a potential to just knock out this bit here, turn this into a C. So I'm going to do this really rough. It's not going to look perfect. And then I'm just going to knock that out of there like this, subtract. So I've got a C there like that. And now I'm going to try putting this in there as some kind of link or something. Just save that other one there. So I'm starting to experiment with the idea of some kind of abstract shape that may fit into another abstract shape. I can't quite visualize where that might go there, but the thing with logo design is you're often trying to create a repeat of a pattern or some kind of visual sample that looks interesting, and I think that has the potential to become interesting in some way. In this really quick tutorial here, I'm not sure I'd be able to visualize it fully, but the idea is there. I'm thinking about using abstract symbols to visualize the letters C and B, or to visualize just one letter of them. So there's lots of other potential ideas we've got with this kind of symbol. So I just accidentally did that, but we made some kind of interesting symbol, kind of a linkage type thing. And then because I'm a web designer, or I work in digital, or I'm kind of a digital marketer type person, the linking thing could have potentially interesting ideas. So I maybe want to turn it around like that, and then I've got some kind of linking symbol that's two C's back to back. And I'd refine that a little bit more and make it look a bit nicer. And now we're starting to see the power of the potential of linking some kind of abstract symbol to a literal meaning. Let's move on to the next one. Word marks. Word marks is one of the easiest, really. I'm not going to spend too long on this. I am oversimplifying this greatly when I say the next sentence, but this is what this section essentially is. You write out your name, you pick a nice font, and you lay it out nicely. That's what essentially this section is. So you look around for nice fonts, and you look around for nice ways of laying them out, and you basically lay the name out in the font. So I may stack it like this, because this is the kind of the cool thing to do with designers. So I might stack it like that and make the tracking really tight, that kind of thing. But I also want to just talk about this a little bit further as well, where you combine a word mark with a symbol. So I had this kind of, I'm really liking this symbol here. I think it's got potential. It's very abstract. It doesn't mean much of anything, but it looks cool, and I'm quite interested by it. So when we come down to the next one, where we're talking about symbols, actually creating a representative symbol that's not so abstract, this is a little bit like putting abstract and literal together, but this is a refinement of it. I really liked this idea that we had here, and I think this would make a really cool symbol for me, because yeah, it just looks cool. So I've kind of made a symbol there, and we could explore this a little bit further on how to kind of refine this a little bit more to actually turn it into a full symbol. So I might potentially outline it with a stroke or something like this. So we put a stroke around it like that, and then connect the two together like that, and we're kind of starting to make a more solid symbol, and now it just looks like car tires or car alloys or something like that. So it wouldn't be too as appropriate for me, but the symbol is the cool idea here, and there's kind of a good element of a symbol here. It's not abstract. It's not quite abstract plus literal. We're trying to make a symbol that represents the company. So obviously one of the most famous examples of this is the Nike tick, and I'm butchering the Nike tick here by drawing it freehand with a pen tool inside Figma. But yeah, we've got the Nike tick there, which is the perfect example of a symbol which means very little, but it becomes an iconic symbol over time. Sometimes you can't make the symbol first. Sometimes you will make an abstract shape that turns into a symbol, and that's ultimately what you want with logo design. So I'm not going to spend too long on this section because as a new logo designer, it's tough to make symbols. You're better off following the steps above to try and pull out a symbol at the end. And then finally, the end result is often what we see logos, classic logos, look like. We have a symbol and a name underneath it, a word mark with a symbol. And I'm just going to use this example to express this down at the bottom. So my final logo might look something like this. And I'm just going to outline that so it's just a touch easier to work with. And my final symbol might end up looking like that. So I have the word there, the word mark next to it, but it looks like the umbrella symbol logo, doesn't it? I've just realised that. It looks like the Resident Evil logo. So I've got both sections there. I've got a symbol and a word mark, and this final stage here is the ultimate stage that you kind of get to with logos. This is the final stage where you've made a useful logo, a useful brand, and now you develop it into other things. So to recap, to go back through these steps, first of all, you've got to decide on the content. Your content for this will probably be your name. Then we need to look at constraints and think about how you can constrain your ideas to actually make a final logo that will work for you. For me, in this one, I picked only shapes, only black, and only using the typeface Druck. Then we looked at some literal examples. We looked at how we could make a logo out of literally the letter C and literally the letter B. And then I looked at it a little bit more abstract towards the end, but we mostly stuck to C and B. After that, we moved on to abstract shapes, and I didn't make anything that was that interesting in this stage, but you might. Abstract shapes, the best way to make abstract shapes is to draw them in a sketchbook or something like that, because I think that's the easiest place to make abstract shapes. After that, we moved on to abstract plus literal. We was trying to use the abstract shapes to make something literal out of a letter C, a letter B, or a combination of the two. Then we moved on to word marks, which is essentially, but not as simple as this, please don't quote me on this, it's essentially picking a nice font and then laying your name out or your company name in a simple way. Then we moved on to symbols. Symbols is the ultimate result of what an abstract logo turns into. You can't always make a symbol at the very beginning of a branding project, and to be honest, making symbols is the hardest thing you'll do as a logo designer. So we didn't spend too long on that. And then finally, we turned the symbol and the word mark into one final piece that would turn into an eventual logo for a business. I hope you found that useful. I'll be doing more kind of design tutorials like this. A couple of people have got in touch with me about ways to look at design and things they want me to cover. So I'm going to do a ton more of these design tutorials, and I'm going to return back to the content stuff probably soon. So until I see you probably tomorrow, hope you enjoyed this, and I will speak to you again soon. Cheers.